Perhaps the only thing more troubling than the sight of black ships on the horizon, approaching with slaughterous intent, is their extended absence from the western shores of Amoran. Torre and his minions have remained quiet and dormant. Too much so for the comfort of any whose homes look out towards the Nightmare Empire. In recent years, it has rarely been more than a few weeks between one Cryxian incursion or threat to the Emery's mainland and another. Rumours of deadly political games abound from that dread place, and with the recent elevation of new Lich Lords, I am naturally reluctant to think of what may happen when the games they play among themselves come to an end, and they seek something else for their amusement. Having only been to the Cryxian archipelago but few times, and rarely of my own volition, what news which filters through to my ears are the hearsay of the cocky or fearful. Still, when one hears enough of it from those who are of one persuasion or the other, and sometimes even both, there is often more than a hint of truth behind the hastily and softly uttered words. I have little cause to offer sympathy towards those of Cryx, but all know they suffered losses during the infernal invasion, alongside the peoples of the Iron Kingdoms. Though whether such losses were intentional on the part of their leaders, I maintain at least a modicum of suspicion. For matters are never so simple with them if there is anything resembling altruism involved. Even so, the servants of the Dragonfather lost as much materially as any other power, even if the cost in souls was minimal. Indeed, many once living servants of the Nightmare Empire now rule their domains in iron frames. As concerns more senior echelon, and more worrisome to the rulers of mainland Amoran, the ambitious and unscrupulous Lich Lord Asphyxius is no longer of Caen, but in his place, Denegra was quickly installed as his successor, alongside another new Lich Lord to replace Morbus, who was destroyed by the Signorans some decades ago now. Consequently, one must hesitate to consider whether Asphyxius' removal from our world is necessarily a good omen for Amoran's future, especially now the counterbalance to Denegra's baleful power, Victoria Haley, is also no more, even if her fate is more uncertain than the departed Lich Lord's. For one thing, if her ambition is anything to go by, Denegra's youth compared to Asphyxius's when he held her office makes her a far more terrifying prospect in the years, decades, and likely centuries to come. Indeed, that she has risen so quickly to be the equal of her fellow Lich Lords, not only in title, but practical influence and authority in fact, not just in name, bodes ill for what she may be capable of. However, after the defeat of the Infernals, with every nation reeling from events of those months, whether directly or not, Cryx's neighbours were compelled to treat with their fickle and erstwhile enemy, if only to ensure a peace to recover from and rebuild what was lost and destroyed. Aware of what this might entail, such treating has ranged from temporary local truces to long-term trade deals, but more pertinently, from reluctant to contemptuous, but always wary, and rightly so. For the raiding fleets of the archipelago stayed in their berths, but developments caused other parties to suspect the Cryxians of planning something ill against the mainland. With a little help, the Signoran Reconnaissance Service has rooted out no few agents attempting to subvert or undermine logistics, military construction, and even religious stability, though one expects there are far more which have not been apprehended. The greater concern is what these Cryxian agents have learned or stolen when the opportunities have arisen. Given Torque's convalescence and the passivity of the Dragonfather's fleets in the aftermath of the claiming, it is certain they have spent no little of the recent years scheming one mischief or other. Among those I know from the Macarian League, they are much troubled by this behaviour of the Cryxian fleets, even if it is supposedly benign. Worryingly for them, detachments from the various branches of the pirate and slaughter fleets have ventured as far as Zoo at Admiral Scar Ravenmane's direction, shadowing Macarian merchantmen, menacing but never taking offensive action. Over the past several years, outposts on a chain of islands now called the Continental Corridor have popped up, offering rest points for the blockade runners, sloops and brigs which make berth in the Cryxian archipelago. Bases from which to conduct raids is to fear, but we will have to see how practical such an option is. For the Macarian League's recovering and growing squadrons of escort frigates will be certain to discourage such enterprises, even if many of these bases were established by force against the native islanders. Likewise, the most influential noble families of Ord have staked a claim on the profits which might accompany contact with the little-known peoples of the southern continent. If nothing else, they and the League together, if perhaps not necessarily by agreement, limit the extent to which the Cryxians can acquire trade and diplomatic influence. Even so, despite all these developments in that far-off continent, little has returned to Imoran except the grumbling of competing merchants and complaints of not just each other and nosy Cryxians, but also the Menite presence under the former sovereign Tristan Durant's governance at the colony of New Ixtia. To Lord Torek himself, his ongoing war against the other dragons seems to have laid him low, at least for the time being, even if a dragon's perception of time might be much different from that of mortals. In decades past, when I wandered the Iron Kingdoms, rumours inevitably reached me of his rumblings and the orders he gave to his minions. Sometimes, these rumours included when the Dragonfather was disobeyed, but his reactions ranged from amusement to rage. And, as usual, occasionally, there was truth in these rumours. But lately, there's been nothing of his decrees or intentions. Like Denegra's new influence and power as a Lich Lord in place of Asphyxius, this silence concerning Lord Torek is no indication of whether he has changed his goals, whatever they may be. That he desires primacy as the solitary dragon of Imoran is undoubted among those who know draconic lore. But what of his plans for the mortal races? His latest battle against Blightergast, though several years ago already now, wounded him, perhaps even grievously, necessitating some sort of absence from more worldly affairs. But his present continued reticence, in a manner of speaking, perhaps the reappearance of the Orgoth from across the waters of the Meridius, has given him pause. As to these invaders from the west, it would seem their memories are long, for while they made landfall in Cador, Cryx was never far from their strategic priorities. I think they knew it would be costly, but it is another matter as to whether they believe their efforts to exact a measure of vengeance for the Dragonfather's conflagration and the last stand at Drea Dracarys were worth it.